Hello, beautiful souls. This is Masami. I hope you are doing well and staying healthy. Well, I wanted to make a video around grief today because not only there's so much grief all across the globe right now, but oftentimes we find ourselves, it's impossible to hold onto so much grief alone. But, we live in the society that is increasingly separated and isolated, and where we don't and we can't come together as human beings to journey through this grieving alongside of one another. So it can become so embedded in us that sometimes it's hard to breathe. And I've been getting a lot of emails around so much grief and sadness that is all around us and within us. So I thought I will come on and record a short video for all of you. And for the Eclipse program, we just did a silent meditation and held the space for one another for grief. So know that frequencies and that energies in the world, in the atmosphere that you are breathing in and out of. And this week with post solar eclipse, and we're heading towards the lunar eclipse in about 2 weeks, it's important that we allow the releasing of the past so that we are ready before the lunar eclipse happens to receive the guidance and receive the wisdom from the cosmic level. Because there's been a lot of shedding that has happened in the last couple months, but also pretty much this entire year. So let's, number one, know that grief is everywhere, and I want to honor that. And let's use grief as a way of softening, as a way of thawing the hardness, the way to open our hearts a little bit further. So grief is like a tenderizer for all of us. So allow yourself to sit with it and let grief help you to touch the depth of your heart and collective hearts. And in that tenderizing, I think we'll actually realize that grief is everywhere. But with that, we can realize and accept that the grief is our common ground. Maybe sometimes I feel like it's more than love. There's a lot of talk about love and light, but if we cannot see the grief as our common thread, it will be very difficult for us to actually recognize the love and light. And when we recognize the grounds that we walk on, that is filled with sadness and grief and tears and so many layers of our ancestral pain, it's hard to accept and receive love and light also. And the grief will open our hearts and let this grief crack us open. Like I said, let the hardened heart melt of the things that are changing in our world, in your life, things that have ended, things that have died, the parts of you that have also died. And we all carry expired self in us. So let the grief support us and guide us in releasing all that. And we can't spiritually, elevate and ascend and expand if we are spiritually bypassing grief continuously. So allow the grief to express itself through the body. I think the embodied grief is one of the main ways that you can process, metabolize, and know that that's what connects all of us together. So don't be afraid of how much grief you hold inside, because sometimes we're afraid of the depth and the amount and the weight of grief that we may accidentally sometimes tap into, especially when you are working through practices like this, tending to your grief and a collective grief. But don't be afraid of that. Embody the grief. And one of the ways that you can embody your grief is to allow the 5 elements to help you. The fire element may come on as grunting sounds, the fiery sounds that come out of your chest and your throat. Maybe the wind and the ether, the movements may come through with you swaying your body or sighing deeply and exhaling so deeply and long that it surprises you. And water can mean that tears are shedding, tears are running down your cheeks, snot's coming down. It just, you want to let go of everything through the fluids that will wash over you and clean you out. Earthly element mean that maybe you grieve by a tree, be the roots, be connected to the roots. Maybe you grieve so deeply that you cannot stay vertical. So you have to be horizontal in bed a little longer this morning. Let it be. Let that earth element help you. The metal element, the hardened heart will begin to liquefy, melt, and soften as you burn that grief and you heat up your whole system. You can feel that heart begin to melt. Grief is actually quite grounding. It can anchor us all. It can anchor you, but collectively. But we've been taught to put a pacifier inside us, to block it, not to grieve, not to be sad, not to express, not to cry with so much agony. Pounding the table, grief. Stomping the floor and the earth, grief. Lying flat on the ground, can't even lift your head up, kind of a grief. But we are not allowed to share that in most cases. But I want you to know that you are allowed, that this is what connects all of us. This is the common ground. And a grief wants to be heard. Grief needs to be heard. And grief needs a friend that would listen. So number one, be that friend for yourself first, and know that our ancestors have always held some kind of sacred space for one another, where they could come together to share their laughters, stories, memories, music, movements, dreams, yearnings, and also their tears. And let's reignite that connection again through what all of us are going through collectively and individually. So here's to coming together on our common grounds, coming together so that we can embody grief together and honor that space in us, in one another, and in yourself. Thank you. And here is to grief. Namaste.